welcome back if you've just returned to us. Let's keep things moving. So we're back in the UK now. It's my pleasure next to speak to the fantastic, phenomenal Colleen Amos, one of the founders of the Amos Bursary. So first off, thanks for joining us. Colleen, could you just give us a brief sort of overview of you and your career for people who don't know you, to your career sort of up to the point where you started the bursary?
Okay, thank you very much for inviting me to take place in the forum actually today. I came to England in the early 60s, so I'm one of the Windrush generation. I came here when I was 7, and my whole schooling experience was one where my sister and I were the only black children in the school, and in fact we were the only black family in the community where we lived. So that gave us a different experience, I think, to a lot of other people. From there, I went to university. I went to Leicester University, where I studied international relations and economic history. And my passion was always about education. So I then went on and did my PGC at the Institute of Education in London. And then after doing the 1-year training that you're required to receive your qualification, I then emigrated and went to live in Zimbabwe. While in Zimbabwe, I was extremely fortunate, and I worked on television as a TV presenter at the same time as teaching. And then I decided that I needed to change. I wanted to do something that was different. And I moved into public relations. And I became the public relations manager for the largest dairy company in Zimbabwe at the time. And I did that for the next 6 years. I left Zimbabwe in 1989 and came back to England. And on my return to England, I really had to decide whether I went back to teaching or whether I continue my career in the private sector and working in PR. And in fact, PR won out. And for the next 15 years, I worked in the private sector in 2 very different companies, where I gained a massive experience, but my passion was always for education. And the last 10 years, I found myself working for education. So I went into Hackney in 2001. And actually, it was at that time where the borough was the lowest performing borough in the UK in terms of education performance. And they set up a private company. And for me, it was just a perfect fit, because I was able to bring my private sector experience and my love of education together. And I was head of communications and marketing for the Learning Trust. And our brief was simple, and that was about turn around the poor performance of education in the borough. And we had 10 years in which to do that. And I'm really proud to say that I was actually part of that process. In 2012, the contract came to an end. And for me, it was a turning point. And it was at that point I decided that I would commit my life really to running the Amos Bursary. So that's my story.
Fantastic. So tell us a little bit about the sort of starting point for the Amos Bursary. You know, what was it that prompted you to start it?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think even before we thought about starting it, I have a son. And at the age of about 16, he, like most young Black men, found themselves in a position where they were having increasing attention by the police. And I'm a very strict mother in the sense that, you know, education comes first. So my son had he had a timetable for revision, because it was about the time when he was doing his GCSEs. And I think a turning point for me was one day when he was late. And he came home when too late for his revision. And he came with a group of friends, and there were 5 friends that he had with him. And one of them said to me, "We're really sorry that we brought Yanni back so late. But we want to promise you that we will protect him, because we know that he will be the one that will succeed." So move forward 5 years. My parents were always passionate about education. They were passionate about learning. They were mentors and didn't realise that we didn't call it mentoring at the time. And they were part of the Windrush generation. So it meant that they were very much pillars of the community, and a lot of people would come to them for advice, and all of our friends, my parents were their parents. So when they passed away within a week of each other, it just seemed natural for us that the thing that we would do is to look at the challenges young Black men face and do something around that. My father, we would have discussions around the dinner table about how difficult it was for young Black men in the UK to actually succeed. And so when they passed away, people donated because they wanted us to leave a legacy. We identified 7 young men that we said that we would support from 16 through to the time they graduated university, and make sure they had all of the skills and all of the opportunities that my parents had given me to make sure that they could aspire and achieve their dreams. And that's what we did. But what happened is within 3 months of that, it was really weird. Like, the young men were coming to us, and the parents were saying, we can't, our sons are just so confident now, their heads are raised. We don't know what you're doing, but you can't stop. So from 2009, when we started with 7 students, we're now in a situation where we now actually have on our books over 200 young men, of which 60 of them have graduated.
Amazing. Talk us a little bit through the process of what sort of support you give these young men, and then let's speak to one.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, let the young man start.
Okay, fantastic.
Talk about his experience,
yeah,
and I'll drop in if he leaves out anything.
I love it. Brilliant. Let's welcome in James. Hi, James.
Hi.
Tell us a little bit about the experience of what the bursary has been enabled you to do.
So I think the first thing we must sort of realise or frame in our minds is that the Amos Bursary isn't just a program. I think it's a transformative movement. That's how I like to visualise it. I think the Amos Bursary is on a mission to transform the lives of young Black men, to transform the narrative, to transform outcomes, not just of men that are on the program, but of young Black men in the UK in particular. I think it does it in 4 ways intentionally, and in 1 way unintentionally. So I think we like to call it like the 4 pillars. With the Amos Bursary, the first thing, it's about recognizing and embracing your excellence. And excellence doesn't actually mean like you have to be perfect or you have to do things right all the time. It's about understanding that you're human, but you're excellent. You have excellence within you, and you have to harness that. You have to use it to fulfill your potential. So I think for me, that was one of the things that really helped me. They taught me to be confident in my abilities academically, but also in actually realizing that I should apply for scholarships. I am able to win awards, and those are things that I'm capable of doing without it seeming like I'm boasting or actually doubting myself a lot of the times. So I think that's the first thing instilled in me, that confidence. But also the tangible parts for that was the opportunities and the experiences that you get with Amos Bursary. So I remember walking into like a dinner. It was first kind of 3-course dinner I'd been to, where the cutleries, there were so many cutleries I didn't know what to do. And actually it was such a great experience because it's something I'll talk about later, but beforehand we were actually taught how to use cutlery. So automatically I was much more comfortable, and I felt like actually this is a space that I can navigate, I can operate in. It was completely different to the things I was used to, but it was something that I could definitely sort of transcend into. Also, I'm fortunate enough to have international experience, which is something that Amos Bursary is very big on. So my first experience was in 2015. I went to Gambia for I think it was 3 months, and I was able to work with the Medical Research Council, and I was able to then partner with some orphanages to teach maths and English, and also do some charitable donations, etc. also engage with some rural communities to, again, make some charitable donations and work with those communities. And that for me was life-changing, not only because it was my first international experience, but also it gave me perspective, and it allowed me to focus on the things that were important, which was helping those that were more vulnerable and giving back to people in need, essentially. So then that kind of leads me on to the giving back element of AB. I think because AB gives so much, I think we're sort of inclined to just want to give back to AB in itself. But also, I think realizing the power that AB has as a sort of vehicle that helps us, that supports us, that fills in the gaps that we can't fill in ourselves. I think that appreciation of those facts makes us, as the Amos Bursary scholars, want to go out into the world and create change in our respective fields, whether that's donating money for charity, which I know a few of the boys have done, starting our own charities and social entrepreneurship initiatives, or just doing whatever we can for the Amos Bursary. Like myself, for example, I've over the years I've kind of taken on more of a I'm less of a scholar now, and I'm more of like I've been drafted in as someone who actually runs some of the sessions, who create initiatives and supports the younger boys, because I understand how important this has been for me. And I think sort of final thing is, and this is kind of like the core element of the program, is the learning and development stuff and the mentorship. So we learn about how to network, we learn about how to use cutlery at formal dinners, we learn about how to dress for interviews, we learn how to present ourselves, etc. And I think those soft skills are so important in helping us as young men to feel comfortable in spaces that we haven't historically been in. And I think the final unintentional, I don't know if I call it unintentional, but you see what I mean. I think the thing that makes Amos Bursary and differentiates it from anything else that I've seen and been involved with, it's the family and community element. It's the fact that, as well as the scheduled sessions, like the learning development stuff or the opportunities, in between that, you still feel like you're part of a wider community. You can access your brotherhood. Your brothers can help you. And we like to call Colleen our mother, because she is. I think from day one, she remembers little things about you. It's like, oh, James, do you want to do medicine? Oh, I remember that you went to Jamaica to do. Like, how do you remember that? I forgot about that. And I think that family feel is what makes Amos Bursary so transformative. And I think that's what a lot of people need to consider when they're building programs or trying to build initiatives. You have to build a community. Without a community element, the change can't be sustainable. And I think, Colleen, have I covered everything?
Colleen, anything to add? That sounds fantastic.
No, I think that he's covered everything. The young men are also given peer and professional mentors, because that's really important to help them kind of on their journey. And we do a lot of work around the soft skills. And then we give them all of the skills that are required for them to be ready to take on internships and ultimately to take their place in work environments. So everything that we do with them is to make sure that they are fully prepared to take their place at the table in corporations or organizations of their choice. And I think that James has been a bit kind of shy about himself. Just to say that for instance, he is one of our scholars. He's studying medicine at the moment at King's College, but he also took a year off this year, and he did his, I think it was his master's in business management, because although he wants to do medicine, he understands that there are basic skills. The world is changing. People are becoming lots more entrepreneurial. We don't know what the world of medicine is going to look like. And he took a management course a year out of his medical practice to actually gain that skill to move him forward. And he did that at Imperial College. But he's very active also at his university, because he is passionate about widening access. And for me, that's what's kind of special. And I would say for most of the boys that are on the program, they value the opportunity that they're given. They know that it's going to really transform their life if they make the most of the opportunities. And he's an example of a young man who's really done that.
It sounds super smart to do what you've done in terms of the medical and the business. And I completely agree that we don't know what the future is, and we don't know where skills will be needed, what will be automated, and what will be what skills you will need to face up to that automation, for example. Let's shift the conversation on slightly, but I think it's absolutely relevant, because what I'm hearing is that there's a lot of learning, action, and, as you said, the soft skills side of things. We hear a lot of in business of initiatives around diversity and inclusion. I'm interested for both of your take about, is that enough? What action do we need to take as people in work and as a society to not just make places diverse and inclusive, but to level the playing field that has not been level? I mean, that's what I heard from the conversation we've just had, is that the level playing for these young men is the playing field for these young men is not level when they start. So what more can we do you think? Colleen, let's start with you.
Yeah. So really good question. So what's been happening over the last few weeks has really changed the landscape. And for a lot of people, they've made them think about themselves and really made them think in other ways. And actually now there is that impetus from everyone to begin to try and make that difference. So from that context, I think that organizations really need to look at every part of their process. The first thing that organizations have to do is to have that very difficult conversation about race. People don't want to talk about it. And we talk about diversity, which is a much wider piece. We talk about inclusion, a much wider piece. But actually what we've seen over the last few weeks has not been about that. It has been about race. So we have to sit down and have those open conversations if we're going to move anything forward. The next thing is that we know that a lot of organizations have been looking at their recruitment process. So things have been put in place where you do blind recruitment and lots of ways to ensure that young men of African and Caribbean descent and women they get to the interview stage. The reality is that when you get to the interview stage, that's a one-on-one situation. That's a human speaking to another human. And whether we like it or not, at that point, our bias can step in. So really, what are leaders in organizations doing to ensure that at that point, their systems are checked thoroughly? And what are the reasons that are being used at that point not to recruit young people of African or Caribbean descent? And I'm speaking from that perspective because that's where my experience lies. So I would say, really think about that. And then when a person makes it into the organization, what do they meet in that organization? What's the culture of that organization? What's their team? What's the team like within that organization? What are the discussions that they have within that organization? And the teams, do the staff feel safe? Is microaggression there? Mm-hmm. Do you hear the comments that we hear frequently, which is, if you say anything, you've got a chip on your shoulder? Yeah. What are the words that are being used and who challenges that? And I think the next thing that organizations have to do if they want action is to actually, for individuals to become allies, for individuals to actually call it out. When you are one Black person and you're in an organization with over 500 people, you need that support behind you. And very often, young people are there on their own, unable to kind of navigate that system. So where are the allies? Where are the people who are going to actually speak up and identify it for what it is and not try to use different languages to describe what's happening? And then you have them within the organization, but how are you going to retain them? Yeah. One of the things that we know is that in terms of promotion, when they enter the organization, They may be there, but the routes to promotion are reduced. So what kind of mentoring are they given? What kind of support are they given? You know, what are the promotional routes? What kind of work are they given to do? A lot of the young people will say they go into the organisation and they're both graduates, and the level and complexity of the work that they're given is very different from that of their. So already their routes to promotion are being held back. So how are you within the organisation making sure that that's provided within a kind of a fair framework? So for me, there's a lot of things that you need to look at that you can do straight away within the organisation. At the end of the day, you know, this is about conversations, and it's about being clear about relationships and being honest about relationships and the biases that you hold within yourself. We spend our lives actually trying to adapt to situations, yeah? And that change has to come. It's not for us to adapt anymore. You need to take ownership and lead that change, and that will lead to an inclusive society.
I'm just conscious that we've kind of run out of our time, but this conversation, I could go on for another hour listening to both of you talk, and I think it's so important. I wanted to thank both of you for taking the time to come and speak to us today. I hope we're going to have more of these sessions in the future, so hopefully you'll both come back and we can dive into the conversation even more. You've actually answered my last question, which is what can people do? So you've already told us that, so that's fantastic. Thank you both so much, and enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll carry on with our next event here at Interconnect.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.